If you were given a chance to start life over, how would you make amends to the lover you repeatedly hurt, the one who ultimately left you forever? This man gave the most heartbreaking answer of all, with his own life. And it's the kind of love story that left countless people sobbing until they couldn't breathe. A fantasy do-over that tore open the truth no lover ever wants to face. It all started with a goodbye that was always meant to happen. He woke up in a panic, only to find his girlfriend, who had died in a car crash the day before, alive and right next to him. He jumped back in shock, his body moving before his mind could catch up. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, not until Mansa reached out and wrapped her arms around him, her warm palm pressed flat against his back. Only then did his tense body finally begin to relax. And then he started rambling about everything that had happened the day before. But Mansa just told him to calm down, said she had a gift for him. Those words hit Ian like a thunderbolt. He remembered it so clearly at this exact time yesterday. Mansa had said the exact same thing, made the exact same move. A wave of dread rose up in Ian's chest, but before he could even catch his breath, he noticed something else that didn't add up. The suit he'd grabbed without thinking. He'd already worn it the day before. He was about to change when a flash hit him. The image of Mansa burning herself on the kettle in the kitchen yesterday morning. He bolted into the kitchen like a madman, about to warn her, but she'd already grabbed a towel to shield her hand. Ian let out a breath, telling himself maybe he was just overthinking it. But the very next second, Mansa burned her hand on a curling iron, and the spot was exactly the same as where the coffee pot had gotten her the day before. To test his theory, he took Mansa's hand and chose a completely different route to work, one they definitely hadn't taken yesterday. He remembered that right here, on this very street, a stranger had spilled his drink all over her. Sure enough, the same guy with the same drink showed up again. Ian pulled Mansa into his arms just in time, shielding her from the splash. He'd barely let out a sigh of relief when he heard Mansa scream behind him. Another passerby had spilled his drink, and it landed on the exact same spot as before. Mansa looked at the fear and confusion written all over his face, and figured he was just cracking under work pressure, seeing things that weren't there. She offered to walk him to the office, just to see if any of the things he was so sure would happen actually did. They made it all the way to the office doors, and his watch was still perfectly intact. The knot in his chest finally loosened. Maybe he really had been overthinking it. Maybe that car crash had just been a nightmare after all. During the meeting, he kept glancing toward the conference room door. He remembered so clearly. Yesterday, Mansa had burst through that door at this exact time and derailed the whole meeting. But the meeting wrapped up without a hitch, and she never showed. Ian let out a long, slow breath of relief. He thought he had finally escaped that awful nightmare. Later that afternoon, though, he was hanging out with his friends and started telling them about the dream he'd had. He said a friend was about to hit on a girl and get shot down, and that another friend was going to take a shot at pool and send the ball flying right off the table, shattering a glass on the edge. His buddies all laughed it off, joking that work was making him lose it. But over the next 15 minutes or so, every single thing he'd called played out exactly as he'd said. That's when it hit him. It wasn't a dream. The things that were supposed to happen were still going to happen. He flagged down a cab right away, determined to find Mansa. But when he looked at the driver's seat, he froze. It was the same driver who'd been behind the wheel when Mansa had her accident. Ian completely lost it, his words tumbling out in a mess. "Just tell me, what do I do? There has to be something I can do." And the driver said, "Be grateful for her. Be grateful for what you have, and love her well." See, Ian was a core guy at his company. His whole life revolved around work. Big projects, major meetings, they all went straight to the top of his calendar. And Mansa, the girlfriend who'd been by his side for years, always came last. Mansa was about to graduate from music school, and she carried two dearest dreams in her heart. One was to stand in the spotlight and sing a song she'd written herself. The other was to build a steady, solid future with Ian, to be truly loved and held close by him. But all the tenderness she gave him just got met with his carelessness. That morning on their way to work, Ian spent the whole walk with his head down, memorizing his speech. When Mansa tried to talk to him, he barely grunted in reply, completely missing the disappointment on her face. Right there on that street, Mansa got bumped by a passerby, and then a motorcycle splashed her with brown drink, ruining her white shirt with a huge stain. She was hurt and angry, but Ian brushed it off without a second thought, gave her a half-hearted go home and change, and headed off to work. On his way to the office, he accidentally knocked his watch against a box on the side of the road, and it cracked. When he got in, he specifically asked his assistant to buy a red cashmere sweater as a gift for Mansa, saying he remembered how much she loved that style. But his assistant's reply left him totally speechless. She said Mansa already owned that exact red sweater, and she'd worn it to the office before, with Ian standing right there next to her. Meanwhile, back at home while practicing piano, Mansa realized Ian had left his meeting notebook behind, worried she'd mess up his big project. She grabbed it and rushed straight to his office, bursting right into the middle of his meeting. But to her surprise, Ian had already brought his own copy. Her sudden entrance didn't help at all. It just embarrassed him in front of his client. The big presentation he'd been prepping for months fell apart. That night, over dinner, all the tension they'd been holding in finally exploded. Ian unloaded all his frustration about the failed meeting onto Mansa, blaming her for everything. She held back her tears and asked him for a dance, hoping to lighten the mood. But he shot her down coldly. Heartbroken, Mansa got up and walked out. Ian followed. He didn't want to let her go. She looked back at him, eyes full of tears. The cab driver asked if he was getting in, but seeing the hope in Mansa's eyes, Ian shut the door. He never could have imagined that that one moment of hesitation would turn into a regret he'd carry for the rest of his life. Just as the cab pulled through the intersection, a truck came barreling in from the side and slammed right into them. Ian sprinted toward the wreckage, and all he could see was twisted metal and broken glass. In the ER, Mansa used her last bit of strength to look at Ian, who was falling apart right in front of her. And with nothing but wordless love in her eyes, she closed them for the last time. Regret washed over Ian like a tidal wave, drowning him completely. So this time around, he was going to change everything. Ian ran like a madman through the streets, searching everywhere Mansa might have gone, but she was nowhere to be found. He called her 100 times, and every single call went straight to voicemail. Panic set in for real. Finally, he found her at a friend's clothing store, browsing through the racks. He said they had to leave London. Right now, anywhere. He didn't care. She could pick the destination. She saw the terror and resolve in his eyes, didn't ask a single question, and walked out with him. They ended up at the train station. As the train slowly pulled away and the scenery started rolling backward outside the window, Ian noticed the landscape growing more and more familiar. And it hit him. Mansa had chosen his hometown. He looked at the tenderness in her eyes, and his own welled up with tears. He'd never really told her about where he came from, never brought her back home, barely even mentioned his childhood. But she had carried all of it with her, close to her heart. Ian's hometown was tucked away in the mountains, and after the train they still had a long walk ahead. Halfway there, a heavy rain started pouring down. So they ducked into an old abandoned shack by the side of the road. Ian gathered some wood to try and warm her up. But as he lit the fire, his wrist hit the corner of the wall. A sharp crack rang out, and he yanked up his sleeve. The watch was shattered again. All hope left him. He turned to face Mansa, his eyes full of sorrow and longing. And Mansa just smiled back at him, sweet and warm. Ian couldn't hold his tears back anymore. He knew there was no outrunning fate. He asked her, "If you only had one day left to live, what would you do?" And she said, "I'd spend it with you, just like this." He used to think that giving her a better life, building a stable future, that's what loving her meant. But only now did he finally understand. All she ever wanted was him, just him, by her side. When the rain let up, Ian took Mansa to the little pub his father used to go to before he passed. And there, he opened up about something he'd held inside for over a decade. When he was small, his dad was a hero to him. But when Ian turned 15, his father lost his job, fell into drinking day and night, and became a completely different person. That fall from grace haunted Ian his whole life. He was terrified of ending up just like his dad, terrified he wouldn't be able to give the woman he loved the security she deserved. So he worked himself to the bone, shut everyone out, and armored himself with busyness. And because of that, he often overlooked how Mansa felt. They rarely even had real time alone together, but she never once complained. When they left the pub, Mansa said she needed to go back to London. She had to be at her graduation performance. It meant everything to her. It was a dream she'd been working toward for years, and she didn't want to leave it unfinished. Ian knew in his heart that going back to London meant going back to the place where the tragedy was waiting. But this time, he didn't try to talk her out of it. He smiled and agreed to go back with her. He finally understood love was never about keeping someone close out of fear, not about controlling their life or making them give up their dreams just to stay safe. Real love meant walking beside them while they went after everything they wanted. Once they were back in London, Ian secretly took the songs she'd written, made 75 copies, and sent them out ahead of time to every musician playing at her graduation show. He also bought her favorite flowers, white roses. The first half of the performance went smoothly, but when Mansa opened her sheet music for the next piece, her breath caught. Printed on the pages was the song she had written herself, and that song she'd written it for Ian. She'd only ever practiced it alone at home, too scared to sing it in front of anyone. While she stood there frozen, Ian walked up onto the stage with a microphone and called out her name. He stepped up to her, looked at the shock and panic in her eyes, and whispered, "Don't let your future fans down." With the whole audience watching, Mansa had no choice but to slowly make her way to center stage. At first, she was trembling all over, so nervous she could barely breathe. But when she looked at Ian in the crowd and saw nothing but encouragement and warmth in his eyes, all that fear just melted away, bit by bit. Her voice was clear and moving, full of love and gentleness. The musicians on stage stopped playing and stood up just to listen. The crowd went completely still. Her voice filled the whole hall. She grew more confident with every note, completely lost in the moment, soaking up every second of her time in the spotlight. When the very last note faded, the room erupted in applause and cheers. She had finally reached that dream she'd held so close, too afraid to even touch. She ran off the stage and threw her arms around Ian. At that moment, she felt like the luckiest person alive. Afterward, Ian took her to that restaurant she'd always talked about, but never had the chance to try. And he had a gift waiting for her, a custom-made bracelet, with every charm holding a meaning that only the two of them understood. When Mansa saw those charms, her nose stung and tears spilled down her cheeks. She finally knew this man she had loved for so long, had actually been listening, actually remembered every word she'd ever said, every wish she'd ever made. As they walked out of the restaurant, the rain started falling again. Just like the rain that had taken Mansa away the day before. Ian knew his time was running out. And then, a cab pulled up not far from them, and Mansa got in, just like she had yesterday. Ian looked at the driver's seat. Same face, same man. But this time, he didn't hesitate for a second. He got in right beside her. The car eased forward into the heavy rain. Ian held Mansa tight, feeling her warmth against him, and felt no fear left in his heart. A few minutes later, blinding headlights rushed toward them. This time around, Ian made good on every regret. He gave up his own life to save the one he loved. In the hospital, Mansa woke up from the crash, and Ian wasn't there beside her. She finally believed everything he'd been telling her. It wasn't just a nightmare, wasn't just in his head. He had known how it would all end. And still, he'd spent every moment making sure she had the most perfect day, and gave her a whole new future with his own life. At the very end of the movie, Mansa packed up her things and carried Ian's love into a new chapter. She sang his song in bars, over and over, every note filled with missing him, with remembering what they had, and with the resolve to live fully for both of them. When the credits rolled, so many people were in tears over a love that crossed the line between life and death. We always look for ourselves in movies, and Ian and Mansa's story is like a mirror, showing so many of us exactly who we are when we love. We're all like Ian in the beginning, taking our partner's love for granted, giving our worst moods and our most careless neglect to the very person who loved us the most. We always think there's plenty of time, that we'll love them properly when we're richer, less busy, more settled, that we'll make up for all the things we owe them later. But we forget how quickly life can turn. The cruelest thing about it, there are no do-overs. In the movie, Ian got one chance to love her again. One more time, even if it cost him everything. He made up for all his regrets and let the girl he loved go on living with both their dreams in her heart. But in real life, we don't get to turn back time, don't get a second chance. People walk away and they're gone forever. Moments pass and they never come back. Real love was never about grand, earth-shattering promises, never about expensive gifts. It lives in the small moments, in appreciating each and every day, in seeing what your partner gives, in matching their kindness with your own, in never holding back your love, and in never taking a sincere heart for granted. There is no what if in life, and love doesn't give you a chance to do it all over again. So while the sun is still warm, while the breeze is still soft, while the one you love is still right by your side, love them well. Cherish them with everything you've got. Don't wait until they're gone to wish you hadn't.